Franchise Growth Show. I'm Joe Carter, founder of the Twin Flame Group and partner with the Franchise Consulting Company. I've built, scaled, and sold multiple companies and worked inside of private equity firms doing due diligence on over $14 billion worth of deals. So I know what makes buyers chase and what makes them walk. Today's guest, he is scaling a luxury salon suite brand across the country without owning real estate, managing employees, or sacrificing margin. Jason Olsen is the founder and CEO of Image Studios, and he is here to break down how he turned a fragmented, overlooked industry into a sleek, scalable franchise that is now north of 130 locations with many, many more to come. But first, quick shout out to our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by DFW Pierce Bespoke, the go-to clothier for founders and executives who want to look as sharp as they think. You built the business, now let's build the look. Pierce Bespoke will craft custom pieces for founders who know that presence is a part of performance. But let's dive right into it. First and foremost, Jason, great to have you on.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for having me here.
Amazing. I'd love to go back to the beginning, kind of like origin story, so to speak. What was that spark behind Imagine Studios, and when did you realize that it could scale far beyond one location?
Yeah, the idea came in 2009 during the Great Recession. Prior to Image, I had started two other companies, both in the automotive industry, and I was a car dealer at the time, and was just, the recession was not fun for anyone in that industry. I had always wanted to get into commercial real estate. I had some experience in residential real estate, but really wanted to make that leap into commercial, and had some friends that were beauty professionals who had turned me on to this new concept that was starting to poke its head around the country of salon suites. And so ended up doing a bunch of research and finding out more about how this concept worked. In June 1st of 2010, we opened the first location for Image Studios here in Salt Lake City, and then ended up opening 6 more locations over the next 5 years here in Salt Lake City before going down the franchise road. But it was a fun endeavor. I love this business. We get to work with beauty professionals who are wanting to start their own business, who rent space from us to then operate their own sole proprietor business. But it's a lot of fun working with entrepreneurs all day long.
I love that, especially the part where you kind of like spotted an opportunity, not necessarily because of trends, but some trends incorporated in there, but ultimately solved a real world problem that I think a lot of people out there are ignoring. From a growth perspective, I know you guys have scaled to 130 locations. I believe you got like 170 more in the pipeline to come. So what are those like 1 to 2 strategic decisions that made exponential growth possible?
Yeah, I mean, with franchising, when you start out, it's a slow, long runway to, get your systems built, put your team together, really work out the kinks with the business model. I had built multiple locations to really make sure we had, figured out some of those things before we started franchising. But, I think, as you start to grow incrementally in franchising, as you get, bigger and bigger, you start to attract more and more attention because of the growth. And that just sort of ends up creating more momentum and growth. I would say a big catalyst for us was actually COVID. During COVID and the shutdowns, a lot of people in almost every industry for a period of time, we were shut down and not allowed to go to work. And people that were in the beauty industry were, doing hair out of their house and very anxious to get back to work. In a lot of states, when they started to lift some of the occupancy restrictions, it was still only one person at a time in a salon. And so it was just this really slow movement back into getting, back to work for a beauty professional. And that's where a lot of people were, with all that time and, not much to do, they started really thinking about maybe it's time that I make the move and go start my own business and rent a salon suite so that I can get back to work. And so we just saw, once the shutdown started to get lifted, just an enormous amount of people in beauty were rushing into this concept, which has fueled our growth even to today. We're still seeing, massive growth and lots of opportunity in beauty to provide these co-working spaces.
I love that. A lot of founders I talk to think that growth is often like kind of all gas, no brakes. But to your point, there was a brake that was kind of not negotiable when it comes to COVID there for a little bit. But as a result, y'all came out even stronger. So that's how you control acceleration, tighten up your model, and discipline replication. I love that. I'd love to dig in further too, if that's okay. So Image is a semi-absentee, kind of asset light, no necessarily employees that are managed because to your point, they're proprietor driven models. So what is the design from kind of day one and what's something that you've learned over time?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, what our business model is about is property management. We're building an asset and then we're subdividing it out and leasing that to different tenants who are operating their own business. But we really focus on how do we build really beautiful space that really gets people that are in the beauty industry excited about moving their business to a place like Image Studios. Or if they're working at a salon or a spa as an employee and they've been thinking about, business ownership at some point, we really want to make sure we build a platform that gets people really excited about, taking their career to the next level. So we really focus a lot on great design and aesthetic throughout our spaces. But we also put a lot of effort into marketing our space to all people that are in the beauty industry, not just hairstylists. And so a lot of the salon suite industry is comprised of space that is really housed by mostly hairstylists. But at Image Studios, there's a lot of different professionals that are under one roof. And so we've got hairstylists, nail artists, barbers, permanent makeup, tattoo artists, people that are doing eyebrows and eyelashes, facials, waxing. We even have about 5% of our tenants nationwide are doing med spa treatments. So they're doing Botox, fillers, and injectables. We even have a big group of people that are just traditional tattoo artists that are at Image Studios. So we really see ourselves as a place for everyone. If you're doing anything beauty related, our space is built for that. And that's really where we try and not just go after one cohort, but the whole entire segment. And that really creates a lot of great cross traffic and referral networks for the beauty professionals that are at Image Studios, because then there's a lot of clients that can be shared back and forth because they're all doing different services and they're not just doing the same thing.
That's pretty phenomenal. I didn't know all of that about like the tattoo artist and that kind of thing. That's fantastic and huge for our listeners because buyers love simplicity, less moving parts, and more ultimately clients or customers that you can drive, the more transferable and valuable a business becomes. So that's amazing. What most salon brands ultimately go mass market, but you went more kind of premium, in my opinion. White Glove Studios, a very sleek design. Like I've looked online and y'all's Instagram and all those kind of social spots are spot on. So why go more kind of luxury, and how did you ultimately validate that level of demand?
Yeah, we really focus again on really making these spaces really create kind of that wow factor for people. Again, our audience is the beauty industry. It's an aesthetic visual industry. It's an artistic industry. We are able to focus on how we create that really beautiful space. My vision was, how do we take something that you would see in New York, LA, or Miami, but bring it to all different parts of the country, in Salt Lake City, in Denver, in Austin, in Omaha. Beauty professionals really want a space that gets them excited about, not just making a lateral move, but really taking a step up into something much nicer. So while we have these really beautiful, gorgeous design spaces, we also are still very competitive in our pricing. So we're not, when people see our space, they think, oh gosh, it looks really luxurious. It must be really expensive. Obviously it does cost some money, but it is not that much more than it costs to rent a traditional salon suite. But we really focus on trying to provide an environment and a platform that really gives them a lot of value. And then what we also do is we then pair that with our business education program that is free for all of our image professionals. But once a month, we'll host a 2-hour event over Zoom where they can learn how to be a solopreneur, run their small business and understand all those foundational pieces of getting into business for the first time. Because, no one's born good at business. You have to learn it. and you can learn it the hard way, and which is making mistakes and learning as you go, or you can try and educate yourself. And so we really want to also be seen as the education platform where people can really become a business rock star. And then we've also got our own smartphone app that helps them run their business. So it does accounting and point of sale and credit card processing and client notes and history and automatic scheduling and bookings. And so we really try to make sure we address all the pain points when someone's looking to go start their own business within the beauty industry. What are the things that they need, and how do we make sure that we provide those tools and resources so that it's a one-stop shop to really grow your business successfully?
That's phenomenal. Obviously, luxury is not all about price. It's really about experience, and you're delivering that to the end customer client. But I absolutely love the fact that you're doing an educational driven concept to help people become better business owners, because that's such a gap in today's industry. So a fantastic job for y'all providing that to your team. That's amazing. From a capital and commitment perspective, obviously without somebody signing an NDA, we can't necessarily go super granular into some of the investment level costs, but for what we can share, my understanding is the investment range, certainly depending upon real estate, is anywhere from kind of like $500K up to maybe $1 million, somewhere in that range. So you're not necessarily looking for like a casual operator at that investment range. What is your ideal franchisee?
Yeah. Typical space averages around 5,000 to 7,000 square feet, which will build out to about 28 to 35 studios that will be individual rooms that you will lease out to people in the beauty industry. And so that typical investment, it varies based on region and size, but it can be anywhere, from 500 to 1.5, depending on how big that building gets. Our ideal franchisees have they've obviously been successful and have been doing something in corporate America for the most part. Some of them are other entrepreneurs that have other businesses that want to get into something. What the theme that we see with the majority of our franchisees is they all have this desire to get into a real estate investment play, or they have already been real estate investors and want to just continue to add on to what they're doing. So I think one of the things that always, for people that are listening, if real estate investing has been something you've always been thinking about or have been doing, this is a really great way. Like you mentioned, Joe, it's an asset light business, right? So typically most franchisees don't own the real estate in the shopping center. If they own real estate, it works even better, but it's a model that works with leasing. And when you lease that space, you can also take advantage of some of those tenant improvement dollars that the landlord will contribute that goes towards your build out. And so we definitely, it's a leasing model that works really well. And the best part about real estate, income is that you have a lot of predictability to look into the future because your income is based on lease agreements. And so when you have, 35 tenants under one roof and they're all on 12 or 24-month lease agreements, you really have a lot of assurance what you'll generate next month in revenue, or next 2 months or 3 months, because the ability to forecast in this business is much, much easier than a typical retail business of any kind, because we have that predictable, scalable, part of the foundation of this business, which we love.
I couldn't agree more. Predictable, consistent revenue / cash flow is one of the big needs, especially when you come in kind of retail or even restaurant driven stuff. It's so volatile in terms of what could or couldn't happen. You got some consistency built. What are some of the systems or processes that have made the biggest difference in scaling Image without having to necessarily be in the weeds every day?
Yeah, a big part of our model is obviously the site selection, real estate negotiation piece. And then once you go through site selection and real estate negotiation, then you advance over to the construction process. And then once that's done, you go towards the opening store process after that, where now your store is open and you're filling those spaces. But in each of those three phases, we are very, very much involved every step of the way to make sure, because a lot of our franchisees, some have experience in real estate. The majority of them don't, but have wanted to. but they're not navigating this on their own and trying to figure out how these deals are structured. We really help with a lot of the negotiation, the LOI structure, lease review, and then especially when it comes to build out, then we're extremely involved getting that space plan configured the right way. When when you're leasing 6,000 square feet, your key to success is making sure you monetize as many of those square feet as possible. Because if it's not leased, it's not generating income. But so there's a lot of good ratios and formulas we work with to try and maximize those footprints to get the most studios, and then being able to make a potential site work out really well on the pro forma. And then as people are going through build out and going through that process, which usually takes 2 to 3 months, that's also when we begin the recruiting process. And so we work very closely with franchisees to help them get their digital strategy launched, their local organic strategy, their networking, and so they can start getting people committed to these studios that will be available as soon as they open. And so it's a lot of fun though, because your customer in this business is an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs are fun to work with because, I think at the end of the day, what an entrepreneur really is a person who is willing to take a risk and start a business because they have a dream, they have a vision, they have a plan. And entrepreneurship is not a walk in the park. It's scary to start a business for anyone. But those emotions, those feelings are part of that, part of what comes with the territory when you start a business. But to be able to help shepherd people and mentor them through this process is really rewarding. Our franchisees are really seen and looked up to as mentors and advisors for these individuals that are not just renting space, but really looking up to them and kind of looking at how they can help them take advantage of, again, that education that we offer. Franchisees are not required to offer the education. We have the curriculum and the platform and the people that will put that on every month. We just want to make sure that franchisees communicate effectively what is available to someone who's looking at moving to Image, because it's not just space that they get access to. They get space and education, tools, and software as part of that membership with Image that makes it such a valuable opportunity for them.
Well, love that. All of that. Tools, system, processes helps the entrepreneur become more successful, which obviously helps the franchisee become more successful. And I wish there was a mentorship style program 28 years ago when I first became an entrepreneur, and somebody that would have shepherded me through that process without me having to fall on my face a couple of times and learn the hard way on some stuff. So the fact that you're helping other people do that, you're paying it forward. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's at the end of the day, the big, my philosophy has always been to be the person that I wish I would have had when I was at that stage. And that's really what, franchising is all about, is sharing that collective wisdom and skill set and knowledge that we've gained over the years and transmitting that back through franchisees so they can move quicker, get open faster, and have less of those pitfalls or those stumbling moments that are just inevitable when you start a business. And that's part of the learning process. But the whole idea is we've got the collective, experience to really help people navigate that a lot faster and avoid a lot of those wrong turns that you have to correct in that process.
I love everything you just said. You give me the warm and fuzzies right now. Where is Image Studios heading in kind of like the next 3 to 5 years? Obviously, from a franchisee standpoint, you have the capacity and capability to really predict future cash flow. But from a brand standpoint, what kind of growth are you preparing for?
Yeah, we are staying very busy on our front. 2025, we opened up 35 locations across the U.S. Our pipeline for 2026 is about 40 to 42. So we've got some really great growth ahead this year. We'll continue on that pace, in the near future as we continue to expand our footprint across the country. I think one of the things we always look at is how do we continually innovate and evolve, the design elements of our space, the support pieces. We're always adding more curriculum and education to our programs that our beauty professionals can take advantage of. And like I mentioned, it's free for life. As long as they're part of the Image community, they have access to this ongoing continuing education. I've always been a big believer, and I don't care what business anyone is in, an entrepreneur should be focused on how do I become an expert, and really, really get good at running my business. And so we take that philosophy and work with our franchisees on that principle, but also transmit and communicate that to our beauty professionals is, how do they become bigger experts at what they're doing? And their skills as a beauty professional, then we work alongside of them with them on the business side, right? How do we help empower them to learn some of the business skills and pieces that they didn't learn when they went to beauty school? Beauty school is where you go to learn a trade, a skill, but it's not a business school, right? And so as anyone knows who's been in business, you have the things you're good at, and then you have the business that you're running, and you want to make sure that you're good at both of those so that you can understand where you're at and where you're going, and how to really set benchmarks and goals to get, better at what you're doing, make more money, or whatever those goals are that you have.
I love it. It's not just about scale, it's positioning. And from what I've seen, and certainly from what you've shared, you're building a brand that can dominate a category by leveraging and giving the capacity for people to grow underneath you. So that's an amazing strategic acquisition style target. 40 to 42, I believe is what you said, the target for openings this upcoming year. So it's, give or take 3 to 4 a month. That's amazing growth that a lot of brands out there do not see. So kudos to y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd love like a kind of like rapid fire style thing if you're open to it.
Sure, yeah.
Is there a founder out there that you follow yourself?
Well, he's not around anymore, but I have always just been fascinated with Steve Jobs. I think he was such a disruptor, and I really love him for the fact he's obviously an incredibly talented founder, but he's also he's a very creative individual. He had an eye for detail that I think is what really made Apple great. And just the way that he approached solving problems and trying to simplify things in the tech world, I think it's always a reminder. I think as founders running, our own companies, we want to, the whole idea though is you want to continually evolve the business to simplify it. Not to, obviously business as any business grows and scales, it gets more complicated and more complex. But you still have to focus on how do you still simplify processes and simplify, in his case, user interface and making, I think when you look at anything that looks simple, that's when there's been a lot of effort and hours put into making something appear simple that has been a very complicated process to get there. So, and we look at that, that same process with what we do, right? There's a lot of moving parts to, getting a site found and built out and, filling it up. But we also, how do we try and simplify each of those steps to make it very clear and easy to understand so that people feel like they know exactly what is, what's next right in front of them, what's next in the next 30, 60, 90 days, so that they can, keep moving forward at a great pace and be successful in what they're doing.
That's awesome. And Steve Jobs is one of my all-time faves as well. So you picked a really good one there. Is there a failure maybe in your past that was your biggest learning lesson?
Yeah, well, there's been a bunch. How much time do we have?
As much as you want.
It's, especially in the very, for the first few locations I built, there's a lot of mistakes made, studios, you want to get that space layout right. And it's a lot more complicated than it appears. You want them to be the right size, not too big, not too small. The problem is once they're built, right? So you really learn a lot along that way. We learned a lot on engineering the space. Where should electrical outlets go? Where should the plumbing be? Lots of learning taking place with heating and cooling. When you've got a shared co-working space, heating and cooling is always tricky. If anyone's ever worked in an office space, which I'm sure a lot of people listening have, it's always too hot or too cold. And it's always, there's that Goldilocks syndrome that goes on. And so we're always looking, learned ways that we engineer those things to really work as best as possible The marketing strategy, lots of things learned on how do we do it the right way? How do we drive our customer acquisition costs down? And I learned a lot of big lessons in my first few lease negotiations I made some mistakes and how what I didn't negotiate into these leases that are, 10-year leases that have, that's a long time to be into an agreement. So, you make those mistakes, you learn from those, but they can hurt. They can sting. But I think the biggest thing I always, encourage anyone to do who's, whether they're first time entrepreneur or a seasoned one, is, the mistakes are part of the process. But the key is you don't want to keep repeating the same ones over and over once you've learned that lesson. I think that's where people need to make sure is what are you learning from this? Because every mistake, as much as it hurts or how much money it costs, that's your learning lesson, and that's really valuable. And so I think people shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes. They should expect to make them. But what they need to really be thoughtful of is then what am I learning from this? And so you don't want to repeat those bad patterns, and you want to repeat the good ones. And so, I've always thought, 50% of the decisions you make in business, especially in the beginning, are correct, and 50% are probably not correct. But your job is to correct the wrong ones, reap the benefits from the good ones. And then over time, you get better at, and reduce that ratio to, it's not 50-50 over time. You start to get much better at making less and less mistakes. But people should be willing to make some mistakes. So even when they're 10 or 15 years into a business, what are you trying to evolve and iterate and experiment with? And that will require some failure. Failure's good, again, but you want to make sure you're thinking about what lessons am I learning along the way? So that you just don't keep banging your head against the wall over and over.
I couldn't agree more. One of my favorite books of all time is Failing Forward by John Maxwell. And if I get the quote wrong, I apologize to John. The difference between the average people and achieving people is their perception of and response to failure when it occurs. You and me are on the same wavelength when it comes to that. What's kind of like the most underrated trait of a successful franchisee?
I would say, I think, I don't think I know. I mean, I'd say process discipline. It's simple, right? You ask people, are you good at following a process? Do you want to follow a process? But really, and I, whether it's a franchisee or just, anyone else in business or, whoever, discipline is huge. And I see where a lot of franchisees or business owners can struggle as they start to, stray from a process and start to just, for whatever reason, just start to do a different thing, a different way. And that the whole idea though is you want to stay true to what's working. Again, that process discipline, I think that really lines up and pays dividends down the road when people are willing to just, show up every day, do what they need to do, make sure they're doing it when they need to do it. And just being disciplined in that approach, because when you're the business owner, when you're the boss, you don't have a lot of people holding you accountable, right? And so it's easier for someone who has a boss to be more disciplined because there's more structure. But I think the challenge that entrepreneurs have is we don't have someone who is overseeing what we're doing. That's us. And so we really got to be that self-discipline to show up and be consistent. I think the people that win in the long run are the ones that just stay in the game the longest, and they have the discipline. And that, may sound boring on the surface, but really though, that's the key to success I see is the person who's willing to stick at it the longest.
I couldn't agree more. Discipline, persistence, and ultimately an indomitable spirit is what you kind of need to be in order to be successful in entrepreneurship. So I couldn't agree with you more. Jason, my opinion has been a masterclass, dude. I'm fairly confident there's some people listening that are like, I want to know more. I'm interested in real estate, but don't know how. This could be my avenue, or maybe they're just looking for that next great opportunity. So if this has resonated with them, how do they reach out to you and your team?
Yeah, the best place. Our website, imagestudiosfranchise.com, has a lot of great information to learn more. You can download our industry report. You can reach out and we'll chat with you and help answer any questions. Also, to follow us on Instagram to see more of the aesthetic side of our brand. Our handle is Image Studios 360 on Instagram. But there's, I think it gives people a lot of ways to, visually see what our space looks like. Once you see how, Image Studios looks and what the layout's like and what those studios look like, it really starts to click and they get it, and it gets them really excited. So I think those are great resources to look at as you're exploring, getting into salon suites and into the real estate.
Love that. And if you didn't catch it, just scroll down in the commentary. We'll make sure and have the website, the Instagram, and all the other social links to Image, so you can go check them out and help it vet to ultimately decide that this is the right brand for you. Jason, you're not just building salon studios, man. You are building a high margin, scalable, investor ready asset that's changing the rules in terms of franchise real estate, in my opinion. So I appreciate you taking time. I know you're a super busy guy, so thank you for taking time for us and our audience.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. For everybody out there, let's continue to make sure that we scale, make decisions that ultimately matters, and create legacies that last. So until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day and talk with you all soon. Bye, everybody.